Trish Denton, please introduce yourself and please conduct a workshop for us.
Will do, Eric. And I know you said it's a tall order to live up to that title, but I learned from the best, you. So thank you so much for organizing this festival. It's really quite epic how many people have been brought together from different parts of the world. And it's just been so rich. And I really appreciate you and this platform and everyone that's here. Happy full moon. And thanks for being here. The workshop is going to be sort of showing by doing. So I'm not going to talk a lot about my work. You can go to my website and check that out to learn more of the back material, but we're going to do quite a bit of interactive game and storytelling. So if you feel like you need to be off camera, you may be able to observe some parts, but a lot of it will happen in breakout rooms. So just to put that out there. Speaking of my website, can you enable me to do some screen sharing, Eric?
Yes, I can do that. Just a moment here.
Thanks.
Okay, it is done.
Perfect. So, sorry, that's the email of how to get into this room. So parallel narratives, there's quite a few good resources on the Slimmer Side website, but down here at the bottom of the homepage is a podcast that talks about sort of the beautiful medley of all the different influences that came together to help me sort of create what I would call a methodology. It's really a creative process of story making. And this is hosted by a student that actually took the class in the inaugural group, Eric Garza. And so I would recommend listening to that website. And I thought, if I may, I know this is an oral storytelling festival, but I wanted to just give a little snippet of some of the recordings that I have made of parallel narratives, if I may. But today we're gonna do some mashups, which are sort of a specialty of parallel narratives, which is taking existing real life oral history tidbits and then interweaving them with the magical in nature. So just to sort of get us into this visualizing state, I want us to look at an image and take some shots at what we think it might be. So what I'm going to do here is have us look. Oops, I have to make sure it's full screen or else you'll be able to see the name of what it is and the guessing won't be able, the guessing won't work. So let me make it, there we go. Okay, great. I just admitted someone from the waiting room, Eric. I hope that's okay. All right, so we see an image. You don't need to use the hand raising function. Just go ahead and pipe up if you have an idea of what this might be.
Paint or dried cracked mud. Roots.
Dried cracked mud, roots.
Yeah,
Estuary.
Yes, rivers flowing into the sea.
Rivers flowing into the sea.
Trees are running from the fire.
Trees are running from the fire.
I see deer.
Deer. Deer are running from the fire.
I see deer with those, horns, huge horns,
Antlers.
long antlers, yes.
Horns.
Blood vessels.
Blood vessels.
Lava,
Lava.
volcanic lava.
Lava flows.
Lightning bolts.
Lightning bolts cascading through the sky.
Part of an eyeball.
It does look like part of an eyeball, the optic nerve attaching to the brain.
I look at it as a mosaic puzzle, and you have to just put all the pieces together.
Great. So I'll use that, the mosaic and the puzzle of putting all the pieces together to segue, because all of those things that we just mentioned relate to what this image is and what it represents in this workshop. It's actually a radar image of the Ganges flowing into the sea. And these are all of the different tributaries that are flowing out into the ocean. And I just think that this is such an apt visual metaphor for stories. They come from the same source. They come from light. They come from within. They are multi-branched. There's different put-in points where you could get in and flow down, and you have choices to make of which direction you could go in order to keep the flow. But ultimately, there's many different courses that you could have taken to get to the same place. And so I find this image very inspiring of tributaries and using that sort of visual imagery to move into our next activity, which is going to require a pen and a piece of paper just to jot down some ideas. And this is an activity called River Stories. And if you could sort of draw some different rivers flowing along on your page, and wherever you decide the starting point is, just go ahead and put the year that you were born. And I'm not going to ask anyone to share that. My birthday is coming up, and I decided, since I missed 2 birthdays because of COVID, that I'm still 2 years younger than I'm going to actually become on the 19th. So go ahead and put the starting date of when you were born, and then just sort of flow with it and draw some river tributaries coming out of there. And we're going to put a couple different points along the river that we can remember in our story. And go ahead and just keep drawing your doodles a little bit, and then I'll give us the prompts of what points we're going to map on this river story. Eric assigned me as the host, so now I have to like keep letting people into the the meeting. Sorry, I'm multitasking a lot here. Great, I'm gonna share my screen. And along those tributaries and that river that will become your story map, we're gonna put 3 different points in our life. And you'll only have to share one of these, so just keep that in mind, that you can go as deeply as you'd like to, and you can share the one you're most comfortable sharing with a small group. The first point is, I remember a time of wonder. We're going to think back in our oral history to a time that we experienced wonder, and it doesn't have to be the most wonderful thing you've ever experienced. It doesn't have to be the most impressive example of wonder, it just has to be the first thing that comes to mind. And I'll tell us the 3 prompts, and then I'm going to give us a good chunk of time to actually like settle into thinking this out. So the second one is, I remember a time I needed help. Who are the helpers, as Mr. Rogers would say? And I remember a time of great change. What is a turning point in your life where great change happened? Octavia Butler says, God is change, and the only lasting truth is change. So we're in a constant state of change. So I'm going to give us about 5 minutes to just, you can mute yourself if you'd like and just settle into this activity of mapping a time when you experienced wonder, a time when you experienced being helped, and a time of great change.
Excuse me, you mean we put that on the drawing, on the doodles of the river?
Yeah. So
Oh,
thinking
okay.
of the river as sort of a timeline that starts at the time you were born and flows to the ocean, at what point along the river did these different things occur for you? When you were 5 years old, when you were 10 years old, you don't remember. It was somewhere between the ages of 17 and 21. You don't have to be specific about it, but just put it somewhere along the river just to help you look at it as a map versus just a chronology. And please let me know if I'm going too fast and if you have any other questions. We can be very interactive since it's a smaller group. I dropped all the questions in the chat if you need a reminder. Once you are done marking them down, you can just sort of write a few sentences or some bullet points to just remind yourself to act as prompts because you are going to share one of those stories. But ultimately, what we're doing right now is we're just remembering. Roerich, who wrote a book called Folk Tales and Reality. And I pretty much just glazed over all of it except for this one chapter that's on magic tales, which is what I love. And parallel narratives is really about inviting people to just break the rules of what's realistic. How should I view my life story? What should I have done? What am I supposed to do? Or just adopting a grand narrative to try to relate your own story to it. The challenge in parallel narratives is if I just decided to resist all of that realistic thinking, then what would I really wish for? What is the wish for my story? And so I'm particularly interested in utopian impulses and how we can sort of harness and use utopian impulses as a tool to send our story way, way, way out into the ether and then reel it back in and have a new perspective on how we look at it. And so with some of the qualities of magic tales that you would find more so in the European tradition of oral storytelling, which is just the breadth of what I've been exposed to because those were the professors and the books and the language that I had access to, but in no way am I saying that is the center of the folkloric canon. There's two sort of principles that I want to introduce that you find in many of these tales. The first one, similia similibus, like makes like. And so often you'll see in a tale that something that is similar to something else can just be conjured out of its form. So for instance, in the tale of the magic flight, two children are fleeing from a nixie, sort of like an evil witch character. And as they're fleeing from this pursuer, they have a comb with them and they throw the comb over their shoulder and all of these spikes come up and slow the nixie down. And they have a mirror with them and they throw the mirror over their shoulder and suddenly the terrain is made of glass and it's slippery and it's hard to see. And then they have a brush and they throw the brush over their shoulder and suddenly everything is all bristly and the nixie can't get through. So thinking in ways of like makes like, or a like item, or a like article of nature can make something similar. Suddenly this log turns into a full table. So just expanding on this idea of like makes like. And then the other principle that we're going to work with is pars pro toto, a part equals the whole. A part equals the whole. So in, let's see, The Goose Girl, a Grimm tale. In The Goose Girl, her mother sends her away with a handkerchief that has 3 drops of her blood on it. And while the young girl is traveling, if she needs the wisdom of her mother, she will pull out the handkerchief and the drops of blood speak on behalf of the mother. So in this, the part of blood, which I just learned the other day that blood is actually a connective tissue, which blew my mind. You think of it as liquid, but it's actually a connective tissue in our body. Just very liquidy connective tissue. So that part of her mother, that connective tissue, is able to conjure her mother's whole being, her mother's spirit, her mother's wisdom. And so a part equals the whole is another principle that we're going to use. And so the challenge is I'm going to send us into breakout rooms. Oh, Kathleen, do you want to just say your question and unmute? You're muted. Oh no, I can't hear you. Okay, let me just look in the chat at what your question was. Can you explain like means like? I didn't understand that. Okay, yes. So think of if somebody throws a brush over her shoulder and the brush creates like this bristly, craggy landscape. And so a bristly, craggy landscape is like a brush, but it's a magical transformation that happens. And so those are a little more literal. It's like brush means brushiness, but it doesn't have to stay there. You can take like means like as far as you want. This phrase might be similar to people who practice homeopathy, because the principle of homeopathy is that you're introducing small parts of the constitutions of that part of a disease, and therefore you're like fighting fire with fire. So that's a similar idea of like makes like as well. I guess I could say that, fighting fire with fire. Marbles creating crazy huge balls. Yes, exactly. So even just something changing in scale is a device that you could use in your stories. And so just jotting these down, like makes like is the first bit of magic that we can use. Or a part equals the whole is the second bit of magic we can use. Great. So that said, what we're going to do is I'm going to split us into breakup rooms, and we're going to work with a partner, hopefully that will work out even with participants that are off camera. And we're going to share, oh, this is what I shared of my moment for wonder, or this is what I shared for my moment of change, just like one sentence synopsis. That one sounds like it would be easier to work with if we wanted to do a part equals the whole. That one sounds like it has a lot of potential if we wanted to work with like makes like. And so just talking through the first step with your partner is like, which story gives us a little more meat to work with to create our concoction. So you can take like 5 whole minutes to do that if you want, of just a negotiation process of what raw materials do we want to work with. My initial river story of I remember a time of wonder combined with some type of device, some type of magic of a part equals the whole. And then you'll just share stories and ideas and brainstorm back and forth. It'll be kind of fast because we don't have a ton of time together today. This is just a sample of work I usually take 6 to 8 weeks to do with people over a good amount of time. But we'll quickly share these ideas back and forth and co-create a story together. You can change the name of the character. You can change the gender. They don't have to have a gender. They can be a starfish. Whatever you want to do, you can change it up, and you and your partner can just volley back and forth of how to build. Yes, and we could do this. Yes, and we could add that. Yes, and this magic might work better. Oh, back it up, back it up. Okay, yeah, what if we did it like this? So just roll with it with your partner. If you have any pressing questions, you can drop back into the main room and we'll figure it out. But we're going to have about another 10-ish, 12 minutes to do this part, to create the story. And then when we come back, you can either choose to share it as a team, or one person can just speak on your behalf, and hopefully we'll have enough time to get some shares in.
So we both share the story. We both share our stories. in a synopsis form. Then we choose between the two stories, or what do we do? So, or we discard one, we choose one, and we work with that, or we create a new story based on those two stories. So, what exactly is the process?
Yeah, so the process is to start with a synopsis of what you shared in your river story, which of the three, I remember a time when I needed help, I remember a moment of wonder, or I remember a time of great change. You'll share one of those. And then, yes, you want to pick some of the material to work with. If you choose to combine the two and make one character, that's fine. Whatever feels like it's easiest for your creative process together, combine those elements. Don't try to fit everything together if it doesn't fit. But if it does, go for it. And ultimately, sorry, Divya's question, will the two of us together create one story? Yes. We're just creating one story in the interest of time right now. We will mash up one of the stories that were shared from the river story with one of the principles of magic to generate one story that is shared. Other questions? And it's okay if we have 1,000 questions, because
I'm still a little unclear. I think you're saying go ahead either with just one of our stories or combine our stories. Is that correct?
you can do either, whatever you decide with your partner. You can pick one of your stories, or if your stories seem like they could be linked together, then you can go that route. But ultimately, you need to make those decisions with your partner of like, how can we creatively construct this thing by combining one of the river stories or the river stories that we shared with one of the magical principles.
Yes, so Maya, she is asking if it's possible, if it flows, to somehow combine the two stories.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
check in with that person though. It's not it's not mechanized. Ultimately, you just want to build with those ingredients of one of the magical principles that I introduced with some of the story elements that you've already shared or heard, and see what you can cook up together.
So there's two steps here. One is seeing if like equals like or part equals whole can be used to involve metaphors in the story. And then the other part is to see if the two stories can be combined.
Yes, if you do not have to do both of those magics of like makes like and a part equals the whole, unless you want to go that far. Some people are just really good at multiple combinations, and some people just want to stick with one story and one magic, and that is fine. You get to decide with your partner what feels fun and creative in this moment. Nobody is getting graded on this. This is for connection and fun, so enjoy it.
Yeah, so it seems like a first step is to look at your own story and see if any metaphor can be added to it, and then see if the two stories can be combined. Okay. No?
Yep.
Yes? Okay.
No, sure. I mean, the first step is to share a synopsis of what you shared in the river stories. The second step is what feels like right material to work with in this exercise. Third step is introduce the magic into that and start to translate the initial real story into something that has more of a folk tale or a magical quality.
Great. Okay, here we go into the rooms.
Fun. The many tributaries of the story, and you traversed many of them in that one session of 10 minutes. So well done. And thank you everyone so much for your willingness. And ultimately with parallel narratives, it's really about lubricating our imaginations and opening our hearts. And the approach that I take is to just not necessarily judge the quality of someone's story, but to invite them in to experiment with it, to see a different perspective. So I hope you experienced a small taste of that and a sample of that in this short workshop. And I'll drop my website in the chat, and I would love to invite folks to make any comments on the blog or share any stories or articles or anything that can keep the conversation going. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Trish. And you did it. You brought the magic. You pulled the rabbit out of the hat. And
They did it.
Well, you really have a talent for enabling people to do mashups, as you call it, and enabling people to bring metaphor and like equals like and part equals whole. You have a talent for helping people bring that into stories. So thank you very much for doing that here.
Thanks.
Okay, yes.